This video is brought to you by Nordvpn. Go to nordvpn.com/bhlhudson or use code bhlhudson to save on your purchase. Yes, I finally got the chance to watch Wonder Woman 1984. Way after everyone else. No point in a long intro here, seeing as I'm several months late anyway, so let's just get right to the movie. Also spoilers! Spoilers for this film. This is like the shortest intro I've ever done, but let's just get into it.
Everyone will see.
So, this movie has been quite divisive. I know every movie that comes out, someone on the internet is going to say, it's the best movie ever made, and someone's going to say, it's the worst. But this one especially, I feel like every take and comment I saw either was, this is the best thing ever, or this was so bad it made me want to gouge my own eyes out. In my opinion, this is neither the best movie ever made, nor the worst. I thought it was pretty bad, though. It had some good stuff in it, which we'll get to, but all in all, I walked away from this feeling that given the DCEU seemed to be headed in a better direction lately, this was a bit of a step back. First off, the cast. Easily the best part of this film for me was the Diana Steve Trevor stuff. That was my favorite part of the first Wonder Woman, but in that film, it was the best part of an otherwise pretty solid movie. Though as time has passed, I've started to feel that movie was a bit more bland and forgettable than I initially felt. But here, it's pretty much the only thing I really enjoyed. Chris Pine is absolutely delightful as Steve Trevor, and the way he plays this guy who's in awe of the 1980s makes a pretty cliche fish-out-of-water premise for his character actually really enjoyable. And it improves the whole experience of the movie because you almost see this 80s world as amazing and futuristic as it's through his amazement of it. And him and Gal Gadot have great chemistry. Gal Gadot, if I'm remembering how to pronounce that correctly, I think she's quite good in this movie when she's interacting with characters more casually. Like conversation scenes with her and Barbara, or especially with Steve, she's quite convincing and likable in. In other scenes where she's delivering exposition, or saying a cool one-liner, or showing an intense emotion, I just didn't think it was a very good performance. It was kind of the same in the first film, but there her interaction scenes really carried it, and the less than stellar acting at times wasn't that noticeable. Here, it did take me out of it a bit, and sometimes really just felt like someone saying lines, rather than the character saying things in the movie's world. Kristen Wiig, I also didn't think was great. I mean, she's fun in that Kristen Wiig kind of way and has some charming moments, but in general, the extremely over-the-top nerdy girl character felt a lot like an SNL parody sometimes. And then as she transformed more into Cheetah, I guess she was okay. It was more the writing and the plot that I had a problem with there. But also, I just didn't really feel she pulled off this villainous role. Maybe it's because I'm so used to seeing Kristen Wiig in ridiculous comedy roles, but I didn't find her threatening, really. She might have been a bit miscast here. And Pedro Pascal, I know we'll get to the fact that this movie is meant to be over-the-top and ridiculous in a bit, but his extremely over-the-top scenery-chewing performance, I wasn't really a fan of. I honestly also think he was miscast here. I love a good over-the-top performance when it's fun, but here, to be honest, it just felt grating to me at times. And I feel like an actor who's maybe a bit more sinister would have been a better choice. Like, I'm not saying Tom Hiddleston would have fit really well for this character, but him as Loki is quite an over-the-top performance, but it works because of how he plays it. So maybe sinister isn't the right description. But for this flustered, over-the-top 80s businessman type character, I think the kind of over-the-top performance they wanted here maybe just isn't in Pedro Pascal's wheelhouse. I think another actor could have been better suited to making that performance more fun than just ridiculous. And on that note, the movie's silliness and cheesiness was something that I know a lot of people are going to say was intentional, and I know it was intentional. This is clearly meant to be kind of a throwback to more silly 80s films and also superhero movies of the 70s and 80s, but that doesn't mean I think it was particularly well done. There's this feeling of genuine authenticity that makes those movies charming that I felt this movie lacks. And most of them, beyond the cheesy silliness of them, that is somewhat a product of the time, also have this core of heart and or a good story and or good characters and arcs that this movie lacks. With this movie, it feels like this is meant to be an homage to cheesy 80s films, is just an excuse to make a movie that isn't very deep and well made with some parts of it. It lacks that actual heart to make it fun. I'm not saying necessarily that's what happened, I'm sure the people behind this did put in effort, I'm just saying that's how the final product ended up feeling for me. It also really felt like a kid's movie to me. And I know a lot of superhero movies are movies kids enjoy, but they're not just for kids. Teens and adults can also enjoy them, as seen by the huge mass appeal of the MCU and other superhero movies today. This, with its extremely simplistic and often very nonsensical plot, felt a lot like a film for little kids. And I'm not trying to insult people who like this when I'm saying that. I'm not saying you're stupid or you're like a little kid for enjoying this. I love a lot of films that a lot of other people wouldn't consider very good. Enjoy what you enjoy. I'm just saying the way the plot progressed and the way characters acted felt like it was being conveyed in an extremely simple way that went beyond just the usual fun superhero stuff that doesn't have to make a ton of sense to, within this movie's very simple story, it doesn't make any sense. Like, the entire way the wishing stone aspect of the film goes is so ridiculously stupid, and then that not only everyone would make a wish and somehow the whole world wouldn't immediately basically be destroyed, but then that everyone would take their wishes back. Like, everyone from every walk of life, all over the world, at the same time. That feels a lot like something from a kid's cartoon. Like a little kid's cartoon. I don't think you can use the excuse here, oh, it's a superhero movie, there's going to be ridiculous stuff. I don't have a problem with a magical stone that grants someone's wishes. I know that doesn't exist in the real world, and that's fine because it's a fantasy movie. But when the movie consistently breaks its own internal logic and simplifies its own story so much that it feels like nothing really should have any consequences, and this world works specifically just for the writer to wrap this movie up at the end, then I find it hard to enjoy because it just feels like I'm watching nothingness really. No tension really, or sense of internal structure or logic. It's hard to get invested because there's no consequence, and the resolution is just so absurd that it doesn't feel at all satisfying. I don't think you can call this nitpicking, or taking a movie too seriously. I'm not asking for the movie to be serious, I'm asking for it to make sense, and tie together in a way that isn't really stupid. I'm trying not to sound mean here, this is not working. And because I feel besides the Steve Diana stuff, the movie doesn't have much else to offer in terms of fun, then I'm just sat there kind of waiting for the movie to end. I was never really engaged in this plot at all. I mean, the everyone taking back their wishes moment reminded me a bit of Superman reversing time by flying around the world, which I know we're more forgiving of because the movie came out in the 70s and superhero movies were like that, but A, we're not in the 70s anymore, and B, that's arguably the worst part of an otherwise good movie that you ignore because it's of the time. If that wishing moment was meant to be an homage to that silliness, then it just took the worst, most silly part of that movie and put it in a 2020 film without any of the other charm and heart of the original. And the character arcs, especially Maxwell Lord's, again feel so in-your-face and simple that it just doesn't make you feel anything. I'm not asking for Parasite or Sunset Boulevard or Shawshank here, but you have to have a bit more than that surface level to make a movie's emotional scenes impactful. Phew, wow, I feel like I went on a bit of a rant there. Sponsor break. Do you hate it when you're trying to watch a YouTube video or a movie or go on a website and it says it's not available in your country? Well, hate no more, because Nordvpn is here to help you unlock entertainment and protect you while you move around online. Recommended by top tech experts from all of these companies. You've probably heard of it, but Nordvpn is the best VPN in the game, with super fast servers and 24/7 customer support. They protect your data and your movement online. When you go to their website, you literally see your IP address right there, because that's how easy it is if you're not using a VPN. You don't want someone to know your IP address and then rub it in your face by putting it at the top of their website. And ironic that this ad is on a video about a film that came out exclusively in the US a few months ago, and only has come out other places more recently. NordVPN can help you watch entertainment that would only be accessible in other parts of the world. Also, it helps me out if you get it. So think of it as you're helping me while also helping yourself. So go to nordvpn.com/BHLHudson or use code BHLHudson to get 70% off a 2-year plan plus 1 month free, courtesy of yours truly. Alright, back to the video. Let's see, the action, I also was not that big of a fan of. Some is a bit fun, like the opening scene, and the mall scene is alright, and parts of the White House fight scene are solid, but otherwise, the wire work is very obvious, and the green screen is hilariously bad at times. I'm still not a big fan of the Cheetah CGI, but to be fair, it wasn't as bad as I was expecting, and that fight with Cheetah at the end, I thought that was just gonna be awful, but it was actually okay. The gold armor aspect of the fight made it a bit more interesting. The 80s world itself, while over the top, I thought was pretty decent. That's one aspect of the film where it's a bit over the top and ridiculous and bright and colorful, and I actually liked it because it feels more purposeful. It gives this fun aesthetic to the film's world, one that I think the plot might have been going for and didn't achieve as much. Also, a lot of it is set in DC, which, as you may know, is always a plus for me. A lot of the dialogue is also really on the nose, and they're just blatant scenes of exposition, like the scene with this guy, where it's just telling you plot information rather than a more creative or interesting way of doing it. To be fair, the movie did make me chuckle a couple of times.
Well, shit, Diana.
I normally wouldn't complain about this, but when a movie isn't really that engaging, I notice little stuff, like there were quite a few continuity errors in some of the scenes, especially involving Pedro Pascal for some reason. I don't know if he had to reshoot stuff or something, and also really noticeable ADR sometimes. Just stuff that I'm not really used to seeing in these big budget movies that was a bit distracting. That one is a bit more of a nitpick though, I'll grant you. Also, on the writing, there's just stuff that comes up like Diana can turn things invisible, and the lasso can show you visions of the past now. And again, I really can't stress enough that there's a difference between crazy, ridiculous superhero world and just making stuff up with no setup or prior explanation within the movie's world. Like, superpowers are inherently ridiculous, but when we've spent quite a bit of time with this character and we generally know her abilities, and it's never been brought up or even set up that she can turn things invisible, and then she just mentions like, yeah, I've been working on it. To me, it feels like that scene from Toy Story, where there's a force field and then an attack dog that eats force fields, where it's like a kid who's just saying like, there's a problem, now I have this power, and that'll solve it, where they just kind of make stuff up. I did sort of enjoy the scene that moment leads to, though. Thought there were some good visuals in there and some okay character stuff between Diana and Steve. If we can go back to Steve Trevor, I did think his goodbye scene was actually pretty good. It was well acted, and while it didn't really make me emotional because I wasn't that engrossed in the film's world up till that point, I can see that being an emotional scene if you were really enjoying the film. But also, they kind of just glance over that Steve's soul stole another man's body for a few days. Like, did that guy not have a life that was affected by this? I know this is kind of a CinemaSins-esque complaint. Like, I'm not asking for an in-depth explanation and backstory, but it's just another example of this movie's very children's story-esque vibe that comes across as just making the movie feel consequenceless and empty and not engaging. Like, there are no repercussions for them stealing the plane after it happens, the world just goes back to normal after the whole wish thing. Like, how would this world even function? It's also hilarious to imagine this is the same world as Batman v Superman, but I wouldn't classify that as an actual complaint. More funny just to think about. Even Maxwell Lord getting to meet the president and then how the president acts. I'm not asking for total realism, but everything about this movie took it so past cheesy and simple to the point where I just didn't feel at all attached to anything that's happening. Which, attachment to anything happening, I don't think is an unreasonable thing to hope for when watching a movie. So overall, yeah, I was not a fan of Wonder Woman 1984. I liked a few select aspects of it, but most of it just felt hollow and silly, not as much for the sake of fun, but for the sake of pushing the story in a certain direction. It has too much going on, and most of it is pretty paper thin. I'll give Wonder Woman 1984 a 3.7 out of 10. And here's a reminder of how my rating system works. So those are my thoughts on Wonder Woman 1984. I feel like this is the closest I've gotten to like a rant video. It was not meant to be like that, but if you enjoyed it, more power to you. You know, like I say, you enjoyed 2.5 hours and I didn't. I feel like you're the winner in this situation. So, there you go. Did you agree or disagree with my review? Let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments. While you're at it, be sure to like this video, check out my Instagram and Twitter at BHL_Hudson, check out this podcast about movies and TV and whatnot I do with a friend of mine, it's called The Poorly Planned Podcast, and subscribe for more videos like the one you just watched. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.